Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, pronouns he, him, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Diego Perez's newest book, Clarity and Connection, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, authors like Diego and Elena, we wouldn't be here today, and we are so truly appreciative of it. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Diego Perez for the launch of his newest collection, Clarity and Connection. Diego is the writer behind the pen name Yung Pueblo. The name Yung Pueblo means young people. It serves to remind him of his Ecuadorian roots, his experiences in activism, and that the collective of humanity is in the midst of important growth. His favorite word, liberation, took on a deeper meaning once he started meditating Vipassana. That through writing and speaking, he aims to support the healing of the individual, realizing that when we release our personal burdens, we contribute to a global peace. Joining Diego in conversation is Elena Brower, a mother, teacher, artist, best-selling author, and host of the Practice You podcast. Elena has taught yoga and meditation since 1999. Her first book, Art of Attention, has been translated into 7 languages, and her second, Practice You, is a bestseller. Her third book, Being You, was released in early 2021. Elena's yoga and meditation classes are on glow.command. Her essential mentorship is beloved for bringing analog creativity to online coursework. She oversees a global team of teachers as a double diamond with doTERRA, and her spoken word work can be heard on Above and Beyond's Flow State albums. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Diego and Elena to the stage.
First of all, it's such a treat to see your face.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Long time. We recently spoke for my podcast, which is coming out soonest. The joy of being asked to celebrate you and celebrate this book is tremendous for me. It's a great honor to be here. And I thought I would start with page 195.
Sure.
Clarity and Connection, 6 signs of maturity. Being open to vulnerability, learning, and letting go is number 1. Seeing more perspectives than just your own. Number 2. Accepting responsibility for your happiness. Prioritizing practices that help you grow. Pausing to think instead of reacting. This has never been more important. And finally, honesty with yourself and others. I start here because I do think while it's really nice to begin at the beginning and start with clarity and land and connection, I do feel like this is some kind of seminal aspect of this collection of writing. And I would love to hear how you have matured since Inward.
Oh, that's such a nice question. The second one hits me the most. Like, I am really doing my best with trying to see other people's perspectives and just really place myself in their shoes, especially when it comes to my wife, my close friends, my family members, my sort of like immediate circle of people. So we all don't always see eye to eye, and that's also okay, right? There's one thing that's been sticking in my mind really often lately about how the ego is so insidious at times that it will try to make what you initially think is your love for them, and actually there's a little bit of layer of a control there where you're trying to have them adopt your views and have them make decisions that are similar to the decisions that you've made. And in the past, you would think it's like, oh, I'm just trying to give them good advice. But in reality, now I'm noticing more and more that actually there was a bit of attachment there that's not allowing me to love them better, to love them loosely, to love them in a way that supports their freedom. Because especially if they're living fine lives, right? They're not like in any danger of making any grave mistake or going in the wrong direction. But at times you still see like, their choices, because they're not like my own, or their views because they're not like my own, it like hurts something inside. So seeing that and letting that go and just trying to love them and appreciate that they have their own journey, and it's a beautiful thing to try to support.
The facing page 194, happens to speak to this. Your relationships improve drastically, and the tension in your mind decreases significantly when you can simply accept people for who they are instead of fixating on how they should change in order to be more like you. Jump into the chat and tell us if you find a little smidgen of yourself in this one.
I found that, I really wanted to cultivate balance in this book. It felt really important. The same way that you should be adamant about having strong boundaries, about nourishing yourself, about making sure that people aren't harming you, we should also check ourselves and make sure that we're not constantly putting the blame on others, that we're not constantly being like, or this person should change. Like we should all, we can all benefit from a bit of change. So trying to see that sometimes the mental tension that's causing us is actually coming from our own attachment to wanting other people to exist in a very specific way.
Yes. Isabel Jordan is raising her hand. You send out the most incredible emails. I just want to tell our viewer, if you're watching this and you aren't on Diego's email list, it might be a really good idea to get on it, because he drops these incredible thoughts of wisdom in his emails. Most recently, on April 25th, you sent 3 thoughts, just like this. The first has to do with rest. And I think for all of us, this is a really important place to touch on as we begin this interview today. When the body is tired, the mind can quickly get defensive. I don't know anything about this. When we repeatedly push ourselves to get a lot done, we forget to prioritize proper rest. Getting caught in a cycle of constant productivity uses up our inner reserves and sometimes even pushes our mind out of balance. This is very important. It's very rudimentary, you would think, except that we don't remember this. Mm-hmm. And you go on to say, the tension in the mind that builds up from exhaustion can easily morph itself into narratives of worry or into fake stories that further agitate the mind. Can you speak a little bit to perhaps our viewer who might not know about your meditation practice and how that practice informs such a real important bit of wisdom?
Yeah, definitely. The meditation practice has been everything for me. So I practice Vipassana, like what was mentioned earlier, and I started back in 2012, and it has just been absolutely fundamental to like my growth, my happiness, improving the relationships that I have with everyone I'm encountering. And it's helped me, especially in relation to what you were talking about, like it's almost like you're building this capacity for self-awareness so that you're seeing like, okay, like I am taking a lot on, and it's fine to work hard. It's like, when you have a goal that you want to attain, you need to put work towards it, but also moving through and into that goal with balance and realizing that rest is a key part of the journey. Like if you're gonna take this, big thing that you're trying to accomplish without rest, it's going to be very difficult to get there. And I think even that one in itself, like I was a message to myself too, because I was like, okay, like I'm taking a lot on, and like the book launch, it takes up a lot of energy, and there's a lot that needs to get done even right before the day when it all launches. So it was like, hey, before you even find that point where you're doing too much, chill, take moments to yourself, get the rest that you need. Took a really nice nap in the middle of the day today. Yes. And I'm feeling much more nourished, but it's so key. And I feel like without meditation, I would have done what I would have done in the past, which is I would have kept moving through the motion very unconsciously. I would have ignored the sense of tiredness. I would have been rather oblivious to this pattern that was developing of just focusing on productivity and not taking care of myself until you hit that burnout point. And I think that's the big gift that meditation has given me, is not only a sense of equanimity where I'm not reacting as much to the difficult moments in life, but just a constant state of self-awareness, which is like, asking myself and just feeling like, where am I at right now? Is there tension here? Is there joy here? Is there peace here? How can I better move into my moments more gently so that I don't cause myself or other people harm?
The one thing that you said, I think, is important for our viewer tonight, which is rest. I think it needs to be an imperative aspect of any big project, any schedule. In my estimation and in my own experience, to slot in rest times, to slot in movement even before the work gets slotted in, has proven to be very helpful to me.
I've been doing the same thing too. I've been putting, like, my new favorite thing is running. I've been doing a lot of running, and I put it in right in before the afternoon begins. It's like I wake up, meditate, do a little bit of work, run, do more work later. And it's so useful.
And around what time do you go for your run?
Oftentimes around like 11:30.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to get on that train and see how it feels. And do it earlier, but I like this plan because the sun is so higher, and there's something for that too, to get that big day sun.
Yeah, and I've learned from I think it was from Dr. Mark Hyman. I'm always listening to him, and he's
you're near him now,
Oh, I don't know. I'm like hoping that we can become
friends.
He's
in Berkshires, although he's in Hawaii right now. But he's a very good friend, and he actually lives in the Berkshires, very close to, I think, where you are. Yeah.
He was mentioning something about how you, if you work out too late, it's going to be hard to go to sleep. And I was like, okay, don't work out at 6 p.m. Do it earlier in the day.
Smart.
Yeah.
The second thought in your most recent email was about jealousy, and it struck me as something that I think is important for right now with the advent and now deep continuance of all social media. The greatest purpose, this is so brilliant. I love talking to you because I feel like, A, I'm your big sister.
Yeah.
B, I'm also your student, and it's just it's a well-rounded relation. The greatest purpose that jealousy serves is letting you know that you aren't loving and accepting yourself enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, it's a key thing. And then, whenever like jealousy, it runs deep because it's literally so deeply entwined in the pattern of craving and aversion. Like you're having both at the same time. You want something and you're also like slightly upset that someone else has it and you don't have it right now. The more that I like study jealousy, whenever it arises inside of me, it's like, hey dude, like you're literally not accepting your own journey. Like you're not accepting, like one, you're not giving out love anymore, and you're just like rolling in this little bit of turmoil that's like, why not me? And it's this like ego moment, as opposed to having, which has been such a beautiful part of the Buddhist teaching that has inspired me so much. Like, why not have sympathetic joy? Like, why not instead be like, okay, that person, they're doing really well, and like, at what point of inspiration can I get that can uplift my journey by seeing someone else succeed? And I think that's been like so valuable in just not creating more tension, because one thing you don't want to do, especially if you're really focused on healing and growing, is you don't want to suppress anything. You want to feel whatever's happening. But there's this beautiful kind of shift, especially as you're becoming more emotionally mature, where you can feel the tension, feel sadness, feel anxiety, and not throw more tension on top of it. Just let it be what it is without letting it dominate you, without letting it take control, and without making it bigger than it needs to be.
You use the word seeing the success of another and feeling inspired instead of feeling jealous.
Mm-hmm.
That's some good medicine right there. Third point, every individual carries their own emotional history, a past that has left deep imprints on the mind, which impacts the way we think and feel about the present. This is all in italics, ready? Whether we have experienced serious trauma or not, All of us have had moments of deep or intense emotions. All of us carry something from the past. And if we do the inner work of letting go, and I think this has like been your main teaching for me, how often can I just let that go and then let that go? If we do the inner work of letting go and building self-awareness, this might be the whole thing, and then you can all go home. If we do the inner work of letting go and building self-awareness, we can make our present lighter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What a gift.
Yeah, it's tough. It's something that I find, like that little third note is something that I find myself writing over and over again. I do this thing where, there's an idea that I find really important that keeps coming up in my mind, and then I will try to write it from multiple perspectives. And at that moment, I was like, what's my third point? It's like, what's the most important point? The most important point is that you carry a history inside of you, and that history is affecting the way you observe the present. And if you don't deal with what's accumulated in your mind, whether you've had trauma or not, everyone has experienced very intense emotions. Everyone has experienced a lot of sadness or a lot of anxiety or just moments of real difficulty where you felt a lot of tension in your mind. And that leaves an imprint. So then there is a value, or anyone can benefit from some degree of self-awareness, from some degree of growing, from some degree of letting go. And it doesn't take, you don't need to have necessarily had the most traumatic life to be like, hey, I could be a little bit happier, I could be a little freer, and let me see what's inside my mind that's, sort of setting me up to repeat the past over and over again, because we all have patterns that we can let go of. Yeah. So
let's go a little more granular into that for a moment, because I think that's an important question that I'm sure is on a few minds here. How does the meditation practice help us to let go of said imprints? Because I feel and have learned, and we've also talked about this, that it's a day-to-day, every time we practice, some aspect of that little imprint gets a little bit released or let go of. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think it'll inspire folks.
Yeah, definitely. And I can only speak from the tradition that I'm a part of, right? Because a lot of meditation techniques are out there that are incredibly valuable. And each path has its own peculiarities, like its own like unique aspects and how they figure out letting go. So in terms of Vipassana, the letting go happens when you start realizing that what you're reacting to are actually your sensations on the body. So you are having thoughts and emotions that are difficult, but immediately those thoughts and emotions, they'll trigger waves of sensations on the body, and you're actually reacting to those sensations. When you realize that it's through your ability to feel as opposed to reacting, you then start teaching yourself how to have equanimity to all these different sensations, the painful ones, the pleasant ones, the ones that you have aversion to, the ones that you have craving for. And this quality of having equanimity being that you're not reacting, you're not craving, you're just observing and taking in the moment as it is. When you do that, there's this pretty unique quality of the mind where it's similar to if you have a fire. And to keep the fire going outside, you need to keep adding wood to it. And in terms of the mind, that wood is your reactions. You keep feeding reactions to it, and that fire of suffering just keeps burning and burning and burning. So the moment that you stop reacting, the moment that you start having equanimity, you stop adding wood to it, and all that old stuff that you have bundled up inside of you starts burning away. And it starts burning away pretty rapidly. So for Vipassana meditators, letting go is literally done through our cultivation of equanimity. And when you're being equanimous, you're not reacting anymore. And if you're not reacting anymore, then the old moments where you reacted just start burning away. Yeah, and that's why a lot of us, when we do those 10-day courses, you come out and you spend the whole time cultivating equanimity, and then you come out and your mind just feels so much lighter. Like you literally are like losing mental weight.
For those who don't have a daily meditation practice, who are still kind of ashamed about this or feeling bad about themselves that they don't, because that was me for a very long time. I think the important point here is that each time we sit, there's a little bit of that imprint being released. Whether you feel like you've had a good meditation or you're a bad meditator, there's something when you sit still and you watch the breath and you cultivate this equanimity, some aspect of that imprint is released. Can you speak a little bit to that sort of on a daily basis, and then we'll move on from here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can, where you can start. It depends on like your like what clicks with your intuition, and also what the degree of conditioning that you have. For some people, they've had such intense conditioning, such difficult things that have happened to them in their lives that meditation might not be for them right now. Maybe a little later down the line, but maybe what would be better for them is something like journaling. And I think the way that journaling can help you is that there's oftentimes so much tension built through repression, through literally just repressing things that are happening. And when you're trying to push them down, you're just making them bigger and thicker, but they're deeper in your mind. And the beauty of like something like journaling, which is a much simpler, the barrier to entry isn't so high, that you can just practice radical honesty with yourself. You can just be honest and practice not running away from yourself. And I think for a lot of people that can help, at the very least, not create more, sort of like really bigger things that end up happening because of suppression.
Yes.
But then it's all through a lot of different systems. Like with therapy, you are building self-awareness, you're building that ability to be radically honest, and you're getting to know yourself. But then with meditating, and you start adding, the ability to concentrate the mind. As soon as the mind starts getting concentrated in a way where you're, developing some sort of one-pointed concentration, by observing the breath or whatnot, the sort of deeper aspects of letting go start happening. And, different meditations have different goals and different ways of doing it. But that quality of being able to be present, the quality of being able to not constantly be in the future or in the past, that's going to help you a ton.
And last point on this, it doesn't matter what road you take. All the roads are leading to the same place, which is how much of these conditions and conditional thoughts can we release in any given moment and see this person across from us as they are.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of today, especially with a lot of different paths. I think for like, they might have different end goals, especially with very different, if you're working within a Vedic tradition, you might have like Christ consciousness as your ultimate goal, or you're working in like a tradition of the Buddha Dhamma, then you have Nibbana as your goal, or Nirvana. But then for where most of us are now, if you build some degree of self-love, some degree of self-awareness, then you're going to not only make better decisions for yourself, but you're also going to be much less likely to cause yourself and other people harm. And I think that's like the more like attainable, sustainable goal that a lot of people are going for, is like, they're not really worrying about enlightenment. They're worrying about, how can I get over what happened in my childhood and this like heavy stuff that I've been carrying, and how can I live better now? And there's a lot of ways to do that. Just find what works for you.
It's interesting. You've referenced this, I think, 3 times already in this talk, and many times on the podcast too, about not causing yourself or other people harm.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I look at this book and I see how it's broken down into a section on clarity and a section on connection, the sort of common thread is this aspect of not causing other people harm. Not, we've seen this story played out dozens of times. We're seeing it almost every day in this country. Hurt people.
All day, yeah.
All day, every day. When I look at the white cops, when I look at the mass shooters, I can feel their upbringing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything that they did is right. I'm saying, wow, there must have been so much pain in that child's life that this seemed like a good and sane idea. And it brings me to want to ask you about the way that you organized these thoughts in this book. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with this sort of dichotomy and why it matters to you right now.
I think, yeah, it's funny. I thank you for pointing that out because I wasn't even seeing that own trend in the way that I'm speaking, but
Yeah.
it does feel like that's the big important thing. Remember there's like this quote of the Buddha about, and I'm totally butchering it, but it's when someone has anger and they want to like express that anger towards something else, it's like holding a hot coal and you're trying to throw it at somebody. And the first thing, if you're holding that hot coal, who gets hurt first? It's you, right? So understanding that like the moment that you want to be ferocious towards somebody, you are making such immense patterns in your mind that are going to keep you trapped in this cycle of ferocity, of like really intense sad emotions that don't serve you well at all. So to be able to like cause harm to another person, you first have to have sort of like rev yourself up enough to cause that harm. And in that revving up, you're literally like scratching, like clawing at your mind. And that's going to hurt for a lifetime, or more. But yeah, it's something that, yeah.
I was just going to say, I picture a record and the lines in the record and the vinyl.
Yeah.
When you said that.
It's a tough thing, but I think that's the beauty of building self-awareness, and the way that I designed the new book was starting with, I wanted to start with the heavier parts of life first, with seeing yourself in your down moments, recognizing how much heartbreaks hurt, recognizing how much losing people hurt. There's even like a poem in there that I wrote that I wrote it after I lost my uncle to COVID.
Yes.
And it's, the sudden, like someone getting pulled out of your life and it's just totally unexpected. But we all go through that, we all at some point or another, like life is ups and downs. Yeah. So being able to acknowledge the down moments felt really important in the beginning of the book. And then after that, just recognizing how like healing yourself and growth, it's not about erasing down moments. That's actually not going to happen. But what is your reaction to these moments? Like, are you reacting intensely? Are you able to produce more love in the situation? Are you able to, be there for yourself and also be a pillar for your family or for the ones around you when dark times are happening?
Page 61, you cannot build a deep connection with someone who's disconnected from themselves. I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but somebody here has gotten very busy trying to build a connection with somebody who isn't connected with themselves. And you need to know that that is not a possible option. You go on to say, when we are in the habit of ignoring what we feel or consistently run away from hard parts of ourselves, distance is created, not just between us and ourselves, but also between us and other people. Our lack of a full embrace of all that we are can make our interactions with others superficial. Been there. Even if there's a desire to connect deeply with someone, that connection will encounter limits and will only ever reach a depth equal to the relationship we have with ourselves. I think this is one of the biggest gifts you give to the world. And I think this is why you have so many devoted folks who are always looking to, what's come from your meditation. I post your meditative thoughts on my feed often, a couple times a week. And I don't do that for many folks. This point that we will only ever reach a depth equal to the amount of love we have for ourselves in other relations is critical.
So important. I think I was only able to write that because it was so clear from my own experience. Like I was so focused on the pursuit of pleasure as a means to run away from my pain that I was just oblivious and totally unconscious to the fact that all my relationships were incredibly superficial. They were so surface level. They had no depth. And that was directly tied to the fact that I was just not open to getting to know myself and not open to dealing with this sadness and anxiety that was just rolling inside of me and needed some sort of, first it needed attention and then it needed some sort of practice to be able to heal it. But it just, it's something that's really common, and it's not meant to like put anyone down, but it's meant to like shine a lens on the fact that for any of us, like all of our relationships will become much brighter and more beautiful and much deeper and more meaningful if we do some inner work. And you know, where I'm not like, a liberated being is very rare. So for most of us, we have a lot of work to do, and we can go deeper. So, and that will make the love in our lives so much more just bountiful.
So practical instructions for this, if you're watching. Ready? Still on the same page 61, the second paragraph. If we can observe our emotions with open arms full of compassion. Okay, I'll say that again. If we can observe our own emotions with open arms full of compassion, guess what happens? It will be much easier to show up and support others when they're going through a moment of personal turbulence. That is kind of the dream of life, to be a good friend to another person by being a good friend to oneself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big gift that you give when you say these things. You move from this like sort of first section all about personal clarity and just so many little, page 91, know your sources of rejuvenation. I really love this. I started a podcast with this. So
Yeah.
good. Know your sources of rejuvenation, the amount of solitude you need to feel fresh again, the activities that strengthen your creativity, the people who light up your spirit. If you can get a handle on those things, our viewer, you're probably going to feel a lot better and a lot more capable in almost every respect. You move on, though, from here into real relationship wisdom.
Yeah.
I know Sarah, I know your wife. Also, I feel like I'm also the older sister and yet also the student. She has so much intelligence in her, like cellular intelligence in her body.
Yeah.
I have this experience. And she gave me permission to talk about the fact that so much of this second section of this book, the connection part, is really from your understanding gained in tandem together.
Yeah, we definitely built that together. Yeah.
I thought it might be nice for our viewer to, get a little insight into your relation and how you guys have worked this out.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny feeling like I do want to talk about our relationship and bring it out into the open, but at the same time, I love that she's such a private person, and she just like
same as badass.
Her circle tight, and she don't need approval from anybody. And it's so inspiring, but she really she runs the show. Like she's my manager. She is the one who names the first book. She named Inward a lot of the pieces that she it was funny when we were meditating. This was years ago. This is probably maybe late 2016 or early 2017, and we were meditating and we finished our evening sit, and she just with those deep, very clear meditative eyes turns to me and she goes, "You should call your book Inward." And I was like, yes, you are correct. But
and you meditate together every day.
Yeah, we do. We sometimes in the mornings we have slightly different schedules. So if one of us needs to wake up a little earlier, then we'll get started without the other. But usually the evenings we do it together. Do our last hour. Huh?
What time in the evenings?
Oh, it fluctuates. It depends on what's happening. So it could be anywhere from 6 to 10, but it's always the evening one is just, whenever before bed, before to really wind down the day.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great. The insights from your relationship, I'm just going to read a couple of them and then we can sort of go on little journeys. One that I really love. It is not possible, page 161. Mm-hmm. It is not possible to erase memories or change the past, but you can stop old behavioral patterns, decrease the intensity of blind reactions, learn to embrace change, accept all emotions that come up, build self-awareness, and strengthen good habits. Healing is intentional action plus time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been hitting at time. That old idea of time heals all wounds. It's no good. It's not a good idea. if anything, it'll let them fester, and like they'll keep appearing as patterns. And but when you build your self-awareness, you see like I got to do something about this. And yeah, there's a lot of ways to go about it. But it's funny, you know, being able to, a lot of that section, right, the love between us, it was built during the pandemic. And Sarah and I, we had spent a lot of time just like busy. I remember I had been traveling a lot leading up to the pandemic, and she's a scientist. So she has like a full serious 9 to 5, and she's always working often. But during that moment when we came back together, it was like, and for a lot of people, right, when they rejoined and they were like kind of in their homes with their families or their friends or their roommates or by themselves, it was like, okay, everything you've learned is being put to a test right now. And in those moments, it was wonderful. Like, not only did we get to like fall in love with each other again, but we also got to be like, oh, there's a lot of stuff we still need to work out between the two of us. And let's see how much communication can support us through this. Or let's see how much, like, what's the best way to show up for you? Oh, by also checking in with myself and seeing, right, what feels right for me to do for you. Like, how can we make these commitments in a way where they feel good for the both of us and no one feels coerced? So a lot of that was just like, you know, literally observations, and we would check in with each other and just, you know, she would tell me like, oh, this is something I've been thinking about. You should put words to this. Or we'll have conversations between the two of us, like, what's a dynamic that was really unhealthy between the two of us? Because before we started meditating, our relationship was like a hurricane. It was just, it was really, you know, the connection was there, but there wasn't any emotional maturity for us to really build, you know, strong, healthy foundation on top of it.
And I assume that neither of you really had a great example of a good relationship, but maybe that assumption is false.
Oh no, I mean, our parents did a good job. I think both of our parents, they've been in like really long-term relationships.
Okay.
They were very beautiful, but I think it's that same sort of thing that a lot of us are generationally dealing with. Like, we didn't have role models in terms of like how, like, what does good mental health look like?
Yeah.
You know, what does, like, how do I deal with this difficult thing that's happened in the past, as opposed to burying it or running away from it?
Yes.
So that was all definitely new for the both of us.
On page 130, speaking of coercion, there's nothing wrong with wanting certain things in a relationship, but we must resist coercing others. I find myself doing this all the time. Instead, we should build strong pathways of honest and calm communication so that both people can feel clearly understood. It is through this mutually shared understanding that each individual commits voluntarily to supporting the harmony of the relationship. This is like coming from an 80-year-old man. Like, this is so old, such good ancient wisdom. You go on to say that a love without attachment is not a love without commitment. This is super important. Attachments are attempts at control, marked by deep inner tension. Voluntary commitments are attempts at supporting happiness and harmony, marked by generosity. Boom! Like, yes, let's say that to everybody.
Yeah.
Ourselves, like, I forget all the time. This is everything right there in relationship.
Thank you. It means so much to me that out of all people that you enjoy it so much, because you've been there from the get for me. Like, you know, I think just to like who you know, to our friends watching now, like, to be candid, when I started writing, it was a very slow start in the beginning because I was still figuring out my voice as a writer and what topics were important to write about, and also figuring out what pieces of myself I was going to show with, you know, whoever wanted to listen. But at some point, like, Elena found my work and was like so supportive and, you know, helped me so much. And then you were there for my first, you know, for my book launch back when Inward was still self-published, and we had this like magical event that kicked everything off. And the fact that you showed support and you saw the value in my words, that opened so many doors for me and just like really, really changed my life. So when I was thinking like, oh, like, who can I have help me out? I was like, it's got to be Elena, like, especially for the Strand, especially for our people in New York City.
New York.
Yeah.
It was only a few blocks from the Strand that we did that launch.
Yeah.
Just a few blocks away. We're going to open up for Q&A, but I just want to put a little highlighter pen on the difference between attachment and commitment.
Right.
Those of us watching who are in relationship, take a second. You might even want to take a pen and piece of paper and note the difference. Attachment is, again, this is on page 130 when you get the book. Attachments are attempts at control marked by deep inner tension. Voluntary commitments, by comparison, are attempts at supporting happiness and harmony marked by generosity.
Yeah. I have to say too, this is something that, so oftentimes what I spend, like if I'm reading a book, it's often about either science fiction lately or history and political theory. And one of the political theories that I'm most inspired by is anarchism. And anarchism, especially in the United States, is something that is really not understood well. But what's driven, like what's one of the key components of anarchism is this idea of people coming into these sort of voluntary federations or voluntary unions where they can work together and, like either through like a workplace or a community. And I kept thinking to myself, like, what is it that makes real relationships work? Like deep, profound, loving relationships where both people are safe. And it's this idea of voluntary commitments, the same component that is happening amongst groups of people is happening amongst individuals in these intimate relationships. And it's funny because that concept of coercion, like it's very easy to take a positive language or something positive and then use it as a manipulative tool.
Yes.
And you see that even when people are like using nonviolence as a form of communication, there's still these like tiny hints of manipulation that we have to be aware of in ourselves and not do that to others. But this concept of like, okay, this is the struggle that I find in our relationship, and this is what I can do. But then also your partner then being like, okay, well, this is how I think I can support you, and I'm not doing that because I feel trapped. I'm doing that because I love you and I want to do that for you.
Generosity.
Yeah, exactly.
Harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Stunning. I want to open it up for questions in case anyone has any. I seem to have 2 unanswered questions. First one, this is a great question. How can we support young people, teens or young adults, to learn or get involved in this concept of letting go thinking? What a great question. I have the same question.
For your young one, yeah.
Totally.
I think that's a great question. And I've been seeing signs of it all over the world. I know within even my own tradition, like you should see there are these amazing videos and just like write-ups about so many young people at once, like thousands of people who are like either, like 5th grade or in middle school, and they're all being taught to meditate at once. They're being taught what we call anapana, which is the observation of the natural breath. And it's also state supported. Like the state is encouraging people to like, to encouraging the organization to like teach more people how to meditate, or to even go into prisons and teach people how to meditate in prisons, and having like full length 10-day courses so that people can come out of that potential to harm. And it's also happening, I think, a lot in the West Coast. And I've heard of a lot of programs like bringing mindfulness, to schools. And when you are teaching yourself and cultivating the quality of the mind of being present, then automatically it's going to help you let go. Because like if you're being present, that means like your hands are open, you're receiving. And if you're being attached, your hands are closed and tight and tense. But that quality of building presence, I think, is something that more and more people are catching up on. And, even if, I think as a parent too, it would be like parents move schools. I see this all the time. And also in my work as an organizer, when I was a young person, like we were trying to change our schools, we would also have our parents come in as allies to help push schools. So if you want something like meditation or some type of like mental health discussions or emotional intelligence building, be a part of your school, you just got to ask, Yeah.
And I think when we're talking to kids, my kid is now 14. He barely wants to hang out with me. And when he's feeling vulnerable, he'll be like, give me a hug or let me snuggle him up. And, but it is very challenging to have that conversation. And I think the point that you made, Diego, about just being present, like, hey, this is what's happening right now. This is what you can observe. It's not the future. It's not the past. It's right now. Let's play in this space for a little while. How I feel. I'm seeing this, how do you feel? And so on like that. I think that's a really good way to start. Second question, was there anything different in how you approached writing this book versus Inward?
Yes. I had some trouble in the beginning feeling sort of tied to the way that Inward was so lean. Like Inward is lean. Like I really challenged myself to be as minimalistic as possible because the goal of that book was really for people to have it on the subway. Like, I'm literally imagining New York City, like being on the subway, you have 30 to 40 minutes on the train. And if you're able to open it and read 5-10 pages and just take something in that will help you reflect for the remainder of the day while you're out there working and doing the hustling that New Yorkers do. And that was like that was the goal. It was like, how can I make something that's really reflective and helps build self-awareness for people who don't meditate, for people who've never gone to therapy, for people who are literally like just building the courage to look a little deeper inside themselves. Right. And clarity and connection was what comes after that. What happens after you start getting to know yourself. And what I found was that as soon as I started writing, I had a little more to say, and I didn't quite feel that like immediate leanness and minimalistic quality that Inward had. I really just had to let it go and was like, let me just be as honest and as truthful as possible in this book, and whatever comes out is what comes out. And the book did end up coming out. It's like, it's about the same page number as Inward, but it has twice the word count. Yeah.
Any one of the questions that was asked is, any advice for encouraging, inviting, convincing your partner who doesn't meditate to meditate with you?
Oh, that's so nice. I think it's fine to ask, like if they're interested and whatnot. But the other thing is, if they're not quite comfortable doing that, then you just need to be bold and do it on your own, while you're hanging out, or even if you live together or not, setting that, if they see you very intentionally setting aside that time, then there is the potential for them to get inspired. They still may not, right? It may not be their thing. Maybe what they need is like therapy or journaling or just something else that might connect with them more. But I saw that in my own relationship, where I noticed very clearly that Sarah and I, especially for different aspects of ourselves, we grow at different rates. So I remember when I decided that I didn't want to drink anymore, I didn't want to drink alcohol anymore, she also decided that she didn't want to drink alcohol anymore. And the same thing for marijuana. We both stopped around the same time. We both decided that we wanted to stop at the same time, but she was able to stop way before I was. Months ahead. And I knew that was also what I wanted to do, but I felt it was just a little slower for me. And she gave me her patience, and she also became like a role model, and was just like living her life, and she figured it out. And then she gave me the space for me to figure it out. And similarly, when I started meditating 2 hours a day, she had hesitation around that, and she didn't join me immediately. But then when she saw, she was like, okay, this dude's not giving up. she eventually just joined on.
I love that. Oh, that really inspires me. I love that. I have a little sense of feminine victory that she was the first one who figured out.
Oh, for sure. I mean, women lead, that's just how it goes.
I have to say, if you are watching and you do still smoke weed, I'm not going to stop you, but I am going to say that meditation off the weed is a lot more accessible
And deeper.
and more deep. Yes.
Yeah.
Any novels that you've read, although I think maybe you have to write one or find somebody to write one. Any novels that you've read that weave these teachings into a beautiful story?
Oh, into a beautiful story.
That's the question.
That's a good one. I don't know if it's these exact like things that I'm writing about, but I love Herman Hesse. Like I like this man. Like, you know, his reading his Siddhartha. If you haven't read it already,
Totally.
when I read Siddhartha, I remember I read it a few times, and then that's what inspired me to write. It was like, dude, take it seriously. You know, like if like this is so beautiful and so simple, that you could potentially like take, you know, be inspired by this format and move that into poetry and into like short essay writing. So I would recommend Siddhartha's Herman Hesse and Siddhartha's Narcissus and Goldman.
Yeah, Goldman. That's totally amazing.
That one is like, especially in terms of like relationships, friendships, and you know, dealing with passion and like how to like live your values. Like Narcissus and Goldman is like just literally not only one of the best books ever written, but it has so much deep stuff in there.
For some reason, I don't know why I'm thinking of this book, but if you haven't read it, The Overstory is an incredible book.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, The Overstory will blow your mind. It has some of these principles in it, like, you know, there's everything from activism to illness, but it's so well written. Oh my gosh. Everybody gets woven together in the end somehow. It is riveting to the end. I mean, I read it on a couple of flights.
I have it, and I started. I think I read like the first like 20 pages.
You got to keep going. It's like Schitt's Creek. It's like Schitt's Creek. You got to get to like episode 10. You got to keep going.
Okay, I'll give it more of my time.
Last question. I think it's probably the most important one. Do you experience loneliness, and how do you cope?
Oh, that's so important.
Yep.
I think I've experienced tons of loneliness, and I think that was one of the things that I was most afraid of, was like the feeling of being alone, and the feeling of or even like being in a strange place or a new place and feeling loneliness amidst many people. I think when I went to college, that was something that was like just hitting me so hard, because I was so far away from what I was accustomed to. Like I remember like in high school, like I grew up really poor, and I went to a high school with all these people who were different ranges of poor. And then I went to a university where not only like there was no diversity in the university, but everyone was wealthy besides like me and a handful of other people. So it was such a strange being put in that setting. I felt such immense loneliness, and it's something that I know shifted like my relationship with loneliness the more I came closer to myself, because there's a lot of distance between you and yourself often, and that loneliness will remain there until that distance closes and closes and closes. And when you can really not only be with yourself in the hard moments, but also be your own best friend, not only will that clearly nourish your other relationships, but you'll enjoy being alone in a very different way. But it takes time, and especially there's one particular component of lying. Like if you're lying to yourself, that's going to create an immense distance between you and yourself. And when we decrease those lies, when we are more honest with ourselves, when we're more loving towards ourselves, then you're going to notice that that natural sense of loneliness will decrease as well. But it takes time. It takes time. I wish you the best.
Part of knowing yourself, page 237 to this point. Part of knowing yourself is taking the time to understand the society in which you live. Just like Diego at college, okay? The direct and indirect messages you absorb as you grow up quietly enter the mind and harden into conditioning that affects your perspective. Without even knowing it, you develop implicit biases. Without critical analysis, the past takes root in your thinking. Without awareness and love, it is hard to live compassionately. So what you're asking us for is Take the time to understand where you are, the context in which you find yourself. Remember that these little messages that you received as a little person have now hardened into ideas and even ideals. You're responsible for checking out your implicit biases.
Right.
You're responsible for critical analysis, and you're responsible for awareness and love.
Yeah. It's thank you for highlighting that, especially towards the end of this. Like, it's really important to realize how our minds are just sponges, and they're just like absorbing, and it's not just how you react that creates your conditioning, but it's what you consume, what media, what people are saying, what's okay and what's not okay in society. And a lot of times that will just like shape our perspective. And being able to just, do your own sort of self-analysis in terms of where you were as a child, where you are, now, and what has affected you in your immediate circle, but then place your immediate circle amidst, like, what is this historical moment that you're inside of? Like, what's happening now? What's created this moment? And if you find yourself sort of negating someone else's perspective, or someone else saying, like, we're experiencing harm, then that's a potential point where you can create more compassion, because there are a lot of systems of harm. And sort of my hope for the future, and I allude to it at the end of the book, is that we can not only recognize the systems of harms that we live inside of, but we can then sort of shift that energy and start building a more structural compassion, where we can literally scale up the compassion that we can experience, as individuals towards one another, and take that into, like, how can we have a compassionate education system? How can we have a compassionate, like, design or urban design in our system? And how can we better engage in our communities? And having, like, compassion and love being the orchestrators of society, like, this is some would say idealistic thinking, but that's okay, because think about how the world was in 1850 and how is the world now in 2021. Well, it's radically different. I would say it's a much better place, but what got us there, it was idealism. So it's fine to be idealistic. It's fine to have high goals. It's fine to let your imagination sort of expand and roam, and, like, think, how can we improve this society that we have in front of us? Because it's absolutely not permanent. Nothing's permanent. So if we're going to allow change to happen, let's change it in a direction of love.
Structural compassion, people. Page 243. This is the last page of the book. I'm just going to read a little bit of it.
Sure.
It is to the benefit of your inner peace not to harm others. Let this truth settle into your mind and awaken when things get tough. When you think revenge will calm your heart, I might have had that thought today, or erase the pain you have felt, remember, when you think spreading the turmoil you feel will ease the fire burning inside of you, remember, when you think making life harder for someone else will avenge your pain, remember, it is to the benefit of your inner peace not to harm others. Let this truth settle into your mind and awaken when things get tough. It's such a gift. You are a gift.
Thank you so much, Elena.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me do this. Thank you for everything. Sabir, the Strand.
I know the Strand. I can't even believe it. I've spent so much time in the Strand. I gotta tell you, it's like my second home in New York City. I'm always in there.
That was me on the racks, like reading the books and then not buying them when I couldn't afford it. That was me.
That has been me inside of the store before, years before here. But yes, thank you both so much for such a fantastic, enlightening, just kind conversation. I'm sure our audience gained a lot out of it. I certainly did. So I appreciate your time immensely. To our audience, thank you for spending the evening with us. If you haven't already purchased a copy of Clarity and Connection, you can get one from the Strand. There's a handy green button at the center of your screen. I've also dropped links to Elena's books, Practice You.
You're sweet, Sabir.
Thank you, in the chat. So if you haven't already read them, please feel free to go and click on the link. On that note, Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.